Chapter 5 may be the next big thing coming to Battlefield 5. It's set to come after Battlefest somewhere around the start of November, roughly a year after the game first launched. But it's unlikely to be the last thing to release for Battlefield 5. Depending on whether the game is set to have a 2 or 3 year life cycle, DICE has some, or actually quite a lot of time to add additional content to the game. There's definitely no shortage of epic battles or even entire aspects of World War II yet to be covered by DICE, so today I wanted to talk about what is still to come for Battlefield 5 in terms of the few things we know are confirmed, what has been hinted at, and, for the majority of this video, purely speculative what could still be coming. This video isn't coming out of nowhere though, because David Sirline, multiplayer producer over at DICE for Battlefield 5, recently put out some interesting thoughts on various aspects of the game they were looking to improve, such as attrition, vehicle play, and the fun factor, but more importantly suggested that the CTE could, and this is very much a maybe, be making a return for Battlefield 5, and also suggested that Chapter 5 on the Pacific was not the last content to come for Battlefield 5. Now, the consideration of a CTE, the long list of things yet to be improved and supposedly on the to-do list, as well as the more explicit suggestion that Chapter 5 isn't the end of Battlefield 5's content path, are enough to give anybody a little bit of hope that Battlefield 5 has yet some life in it. But the real question in determining how much we can expect from Battlefield 5 in the coming weeks, months, and even years comes down to how long the game is maintained, and that is very much determined by the fact when the next Battlefield title releases, which, depending on what you believe, there is really two ways this could go. Currently, there is absolutely a rumor out there, and it is decently credible, that the next Battlefield game will be Battlefield Bad Company 3, and it will be releasing as launch title for the PlayStation 5. And this makes somewhat sense, given the rumors that Battlefield 5 wasn't actually set to launch until 2020, but instead, Battlefield Bad Company 3 was supposed to launch in 2018. It would explain the unfinished state of Battlefield 5 and how rushed the game was overall, but has of course not at all been officially confirmed by any developer or representative of EA. If that is the case, Battlefield 5 very much looks like to be getting the same kind of life cycle that Battlefield 1 did, with 2 years of active support, DLC, or in our case Tides of War, after which things are more or less done for. That would mean, come 2020 and the end of that year, we'll be getting a new Battlefield title. If that's the case, likely already in late summer, new content will stop to be added to Battlefield 5, as the marketing efforts for the next Battlefield game start to ramp up, and EA and DICE start to build some hype for their new game. This of course would give DICE only about 6 months following the release of the Pacific and the last content of that, likely in January, to add any other major additions and significantly limit how much we can expect to see in Battlefield 5. On the other hand, if the rumor is untrue, or Bad Company 3 isn't a launch title for the PlayStation 5, instead releases 2021 or sometime later, we will have significantly more time to add content to Battlefield 5, and we may end up with a situation similar to Battlefield 4, where not only was the life cycle of the game extended by the relative failure of Battlefield Hardline to capture additional audiences as consequence of being a spin-off game, but with the addition of a CTE, we may find ourselves once more designing community maps and engaging in improving the game directly with the devs. The fact that the CTE is even under consideration, to me, provides a little bit of support for the theory that, in fact, the life cycle of Battlefield 5 is going to be a little bit longer than, say, Battlefield 1, because why otherwise now even consider adding a CTE if, let's say, 8 months from now, the game's life cycle is slowly but surely coming to an end? That could of course be because, much like the implementation of private games they are supposedly working on, currently DICE plans to make these features future-proof for future titles, meaning that they can significantly easier introduce them into future iterations in the series. But that is of course all entirely speculation. In terms of future features, hopes for the CTE have obviously been revitalized with the tweets by David Sirline, although once again I should state, this is no confirmation that the CTE is actually coming, it's just simply a maybe instead of the absolute no we previously had from the community managers. We're also of course still waiting on some key features of the game, such as vehicle customization, but who knows if that actually is ever coming. Alongside future theaters of war, most likely, we will see some more weapons, vehicles, and probably even factions, but with Firestorm seemingly sidelined, DICE having confirmed that we won't be getting any additional single-player war stories, and the 5v5 mode cancelled, the focus very much seems to be on the default multiplayer experience. So, what theaters of war could we possibly see, and how many of them will we likely see, depending on how long DICE supports Battlefield 5 for? Now, the most obvious, and the one my community at least wants to see next, is the Eastern Front. The Soviets are very much the obvious next choice for a major chapter. Introducing the Soviets as a faction is almost a must for a World War II game. After all, they are one of the main factions that fought in the war, and by far suffered the most casualties of any nation during that conflict. The starting stages of Operation Barbarossa, Stalingrad, Kursk, or even Operation Blue in the Caucasus, there's really plentiful of iconic battles and locations, as well as equipment in terms of vehicles, weapons, and gadgets to add to the game that will get fanboys excited. There is currently one weapon in the game files that is actually of Soviet origin. The Soviet LAD LMG was originally tied to the 5v5 mode and intended for release with it. So as it stands now, it is very much unsure if we will ever see that weapon and if it is intended as part of an Eastern Front DLC or chapter of Tides of War. Also, there's a data-mined Winterkrieg Elite set for the German faction, which is a nod at the Winter War, which is just basically a direct translation of Winterkrieg, the name of a conflict fought between the USSR and Finland, following which the Germans and Finnish actually joined forces to attack the USSR in what was then named the Continuation War. Essentially, another somewhat forgotten or untold war story that very much could be explored by DICE, and at least in connection with that Elite set, seems to at least be a likely option they are considering. I'd most definitely love to see it, as it is one of those series of battles that very much doesn't get a lot of attention when it comes to gaming or popular culture. Ultimately, ideally of course, the end of the Eastern Front is in a Battle of Berlin, which could of course result in some absolutely amazing urban combat. Imagine fighting over the Reichstag or the Brandenburg Gate. I mean, how much more iconic is it gonna get? Arguably, the final chapter of Battlefield 5 could be one focused entirely on the fall of Berlin, with 2 or 3 maps centered on more urban combat in some of the larger parts of the cities, giving a little bit of a mixture between open ground and close-knit infantry combat. The second obvious addition that almost has to be in a World War II game, but depending on how long Battlefield 5 has, I'm not sure we'll actually make it in, is the second part of the Western Front, the Allied landings. Yes, we need Omaha Beach, we need D-Day. I mean, what would a World War II game really be without that? Equally, actually, the liberation fights across northern France could provide for some interesting battles as the Allied forces kind of move into the German-occupied territory and free them from occupation. This is also where we could see some of the French resistance members being included in the fighting. While, yes, they weren't usually directly involved in combat, they were, of course, very active in sabotaging the Germans, and there has been some concept art showing a number of designs of them, so it's not completely unlikely. Also, of course, the Battle of the Bulge, the last German major offensive, could offer some respite from the otherwise very defensive offensive split between the Axis and Allied factions. This currently seems like the most likely direction for Chapter 6 of Tides of War, because firstly, supposedly the Americans are going to be the main focus of Chapter 6 of Tides of War once more, but not in the Pacific setting, and furthermore, the only reference so far in the game files to Chapter 6 in any way, shape or form is a weapon skin including an American flag in it. That, of course, once again, thanks to Temporyal, who always comes through with a little bit of clutch information to make these videos more interesting. I have his Twitter and YouTube linked down below in the description, by the way, if you want to stay up to date with the latest data mining information for Battlefield 5. There are then, of course, so many more parts of World War II which arguably haven't been covered either by Battlefield 5 and really should be, or even in any World War II game. I mean, amongst them are the Allied evacuation at the beginning of the Second World War. This includes, of course, Dunkirk, but also some of the battles surrounding it, such as the Siege of Lille, which was fought by the French, and the Siege of Calais, which was fought by the British and French combined to delay the German advances on Dunkirk. Some very interesting battles there with some very interesting scenes to play them out in. Of course, what about the US invasion of Italy, or more on the North Africa campaigns? There seems to be quite a bit of concept art from those campaigns that doesn't seem to be realized in any form in any of the current maps we have. So again, it's not completely unlikely that we may see one more desert map or another map centered on the North Africa campaigns. And then a must mention is of course the Second Sino-Japanese War. If part of World War II is ever arguably overlooked in video games or Western culture, this is it. I mean, China suffered more military deaths than any other nation in World War II, other than the Soviets and the German, and by far more than the United Kingdom and US combined. Further, the variety of different locations and areas there are, frankly, is astounding. I mean, did you know that there was a Battle of Shanghai, where according to official reports, more than 1 million troops took part, with casualties estimated in the hundreds of thousands. Supposedly, it's known as the Stalingrad of the Yangtze River. There was a battle over Beijing, and of course the battle and later massacre of Nanjing, the capital of China at the time. Frankly, there are so many iconic and interesting settings not even mentioned in most popular media that DICE really has no excuse or lack of options to go after. I'd love to actually see a little bit of the Second Sino-Japanese War, as I think it truly would add a different flavor to Battlefield 5. And unlike a lot of the existing untold stories from World War II we've had in our multiplayer maps, is actually of significant importance and gets overlooked far too often. The ultimate question, of course, is will any of this come to fruition? And the most realistic response to this is likely no. I expect we'll see further chapters following Chapter 5, and likely those will include some of the most iconic Soviet and maybe even Allied battles. However, once autumn 2020 comes around, I think we will see support for Battlefield 5 pulled, and the focus very much likely will be on the next Battlefield game. But that pretty much wraps it up for what could be next for Battlefield 5. Feel free to share your own opinions down below. If you enjoyed the video, a rating would be much appreciated. And with all that being said, I'd like to thank you very much for watching and hope to see you in the next Battlefield 5 video.